to the Katmai coast and checked out Brooks River and the McNeil River Sanctuary. So here is the large picture of the Katmai National Park. It is a significant size.
I understand that the run for salmon on the McNeil River is quite a bit earlier than the Bristol Bay. So the ones out there, when that's swimming them down, they just go over that little hump and then you're into spawning reds.
Exactly. It's a really short run there.
20 miles.
It's like tiny. Yeah. It almost reminds me of our like Chilkoot River is like really
over half a day.
Exactly. Yeah. But they pick around for a while. So
oh yes.
So the reason why we have a Katmai National Park was because in 1912 we had a pretty significant eruption. It was the largest eruption of the 20th century. Here's a little map that they provided at the visitor center, and you can see here Nova Rupta is this large purple in Mount St. Helens, which everyone seems to remember is this a tiny little blip. So that was a pretty big eruption. It happened in 1912. And what happened was in 1912, a lot of people were distracted by another event. Do you remember what it was?
1912?
Yeah, 1912.
Kemal Ataturk killed about 1 million Armenians about that time.
Not such a high death toll on this one, but very public throughout the entire world. Everyone heard about it. It was the Titanic.
Oh, okay.
So it happened within months of each other, and it completely disrupted all of the media. All of the newspapers were covering Titanic, and pretty far up in Alaska, it was the biggest eruption. It happened for weeks. They had lava exploding. It decimated native settlements, significant native settlements. So it was a pretty big deal. So to commemorate this, it was deemed that we will protect it, and the Katmai National Park was born. Here is one of those original photographs from, I think this was 1917 when they first started going out there, but it was called the Valley of 10,000 Smokes because of the fumaroles that were coming out. Now at this day, which you can see, a bear butt. There is not that many of them. Oh, I skipped it. Okay, so the Katmai Coast, as we mentioned, it's it has salmon, you have lynx, wolves and bears, which I saw all of them in those little bit of time that I was there. There's also a lot of scientific research that's being done. When I was there, we actually had NASA scientists and scientists from University of Fairbanks. They were recording how soil changes after volcanic eruptions and looking at how that could happen in Mars. So kind of comparing that. And actually one of the, from what I understand, one of the rockets that recently actually landed the right side up this time is going to get some of those soil samples and bring them back here so they can compare that. So that's pretty fun. It's also a really large place. It's 4 million acres. And I asked Google how big that is in comparison to other things. And it's about the size of Hawaii, the entire state of Hawaii, or about twice the size of Yellowstone National Park. So it's it goes on for a while. So let's see. It's split up into 2 different portions. I want to say Nushagak, Bristol Bay Lowlands, and that's kind of like the flatter area, and that's where Brooks Camp is. So you get a lot of those little kettle ponds, really flat area, really good for, spawning salmon to just go up and do their thing. And there's also permafrost in those areas that are still remains to this day. And then up near McNeil River, so you're flying about 350 miles straight up north, you get to the Aleutian Range, and that's separated by 3 different landforms. But the lake region around Naknek is where McNeil River is. So Katmai National Park. You get into here, Naknek, flying to King Salmon, and here's where kind of this flatter area is, and then you're flying north to McNeil River State Game Sanctuary up here, and that's about 350 miles over. And then that's completely different section. Let's see. So as I mentioned, you're flying out of Anchorage. You can take Alaska Airlines. I suggest using miles. It's actually literally the cheapest way. You can go round trip for about $100 with taxes. And you're flying in out of Anchorage and you're going into King Salmon. You can visit this little fishing village, which if you're a commercial fisherman, you're going to familiar with that area if you're fishing Bristol Bay. And then you're flying through from that arrow down there. I ended up taking a ferry from King Salmon to Brooks Camp. Wow. But my suggestion is to fly. So I flew with two other friends, and we decided to break it up and see which is the easier way.
Did you do any flying with Dan Salmon out of Igiugig?
I didn't. No, that would be.
Of course, he has died and crashed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This was I would say this is the best time to actually gamble on a float plane because it's a 30-minute flight from King Salmon to Brooks Camp. It's the same price as the ferry, as the lake ferry, and it takes half as long. Also, Naknek Lake is really windy. Really windy, so it's a very bumpy ride to get out there.
I had the opportunity through my daughter's connection with Dan Salmon at Igiugig.
Yeah,
He took a friend and I on about an hour and a half flight all through that whole watershed.
oh wow.
Started, went across the bottom of Iliamna and then Kukaklik, and then the tributaries, all come in there. And I think we counted almost 80 bears.
Yeah, just
in one flight.
Just feed. I think I saw more bears on the flights than on the ground. Actually,
some of those bears. We came across this bear lying on his back in the water flowing around him, and he's just laying here like this. And others, I think those sows must take turns nursing the others, because we'd see 5 or 6 cubs, and the females would
head out,
rotate and do a little babysitting.
We had a ranger kind of tell us about the maternity styles of female brown bears, and she was saying that especially amongst sisters, they will nurse each other's cubs and sometimes take over each other's cubs if something happens. Because when we were up in Brooks Camp, we saw 2 sows, and they were sisters, and the bears that the sow was taking care of were not her own, were her sisters. So they definitely kind of swapped there and kept it that way. I guess it was easier, just like you could take care of those. But they get chunky. They get chunky. I saw a boar dig out like a sand divot for his tummy because it was so big. Like couldn't lay flat without the flat tummy. So as I mentioned, the transportation options, you're always going to start from Anchorage, but it's a great way to use up your miles getting to King Salmon. And Katmai area is the best one to get, or unless you're hiring a private or you have a connection there. But yeah, so Katmai area is the best way, about 30 minutes. And like I mentioned, you could take a boat, it's a ferry, but it's the same cost as flying. It's also weather dependent. So if the flight gets canceled, the ferry will also get canceled. It's not more reliable. It's also a longer trip. And the only downside is that you are missing a beautiful lake ride. It's a gorgeous lake ride, but it's very bumpy. It's up to you. A lot of people ask me where the best time to visit is. And so generally I would say Katmai is prone to weather tantrums. So from late June to early September is about the best time. Was that a question?
No, that's
Oh, okay.
It was Labor Day.
Labor Day. Oh, was it good
That was-
weather?
Well, that's when my daughter had to be there at school. I couldn't have a place to live.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Actually, when we were at Brooks Camp, a lot of locals from Anchorage go there in the beginning of June because it's still pretty quiet, it's good weather. So I say June for Brooks Camp. It's not so busy. The only issue is that on the waterfalls, there's not going to be many bears in the immediate vicinity, but we saw plenty of bears walking all around Brooks Camp. The boars were chasing the sows to mate. We had sows with 2 and 3 year old cubs. We saw lynx on the road. We saw wolves. So it was still pretty active in terms of wildlife, but not so active in terms of people. And that's kind of my favorite combination. And then for McNeil, August is the best time, but June is the best time in weather. That's according to the rangers that live there. For me, go whenever you get your ticket. It's a lottery system. So if you get your ticket at any time, just go with that, because that is a really nice lottery to win. Okay, so let's see. So speaking of lotteries, if you do want to go and stay at Brooks Camp, the camp itself is open from June 1st to September 17th, and that's the only time you can be there. The camping reservations opens January 7th at 8 a.m. And obviously I got it last year, and by 8:05, every single reservation for the entire summer was taken. In 5 minutes, all of it will be gone. Sometimes people cancel and last minute you can plan to go, but it's not a last minute trip. It's a trip that takes some planning, in my opinion. And then if you do want to stay, there is a lodge. The cabins are not fancy, they're very tiny, but some people like that. And you can, it's also a lottery, and you can apply December 1st, so the month of December, and then they tell you in February if you've got in a room or not. And I believe for this year, it's 1,700 per cabin per night.
How much?
1,700 per cabin per night. It sleeps 4. It has 2 bunk beds and no bathrooms. So I know. So I say camp.
When I was at Iggy,
Yeah.
I had, the fishing was, I had stayed with my daughter and I just had a little bunk run out to go fishing.
There you
with
go.
Little motorized vehicle, and staying in the lodge, they were getting hundreds of dollars a day to go out with a guide, and we're having it for free.
So get the hookup is the way to go. Yeah, it's tricky. It is, I would say we were there June 18th through the 21st, and it was not yet super busy, but immediately after we left, it got busy. This is definitely, and by busy, I mean like going down to the cruise dock on a busy, yeah. That's very surprising, but saying that the actual bear viewing platforms are about 2 miles from the lodge. So, you can walk over. So McNeil River, this is the second part of the trip, and this was done in August, and this is the Aleutian Chain area. So now we're flying north about 250 miles. Wait. Yep, okay. So this is that smaller chunk of the area up north, and it's only 125,000 acres. It is not part of the Katmai National Park. It's kind of just attached to it on the side. It was established not that long ago. 67, and it was to protect the world's largest congregation of brown bears. And I think the record setting of bears in one day in one area of the river was 87 in one little nook of the river. So 87 brown bears. It's pretty significant because, as I mentioned, it is not a very big river at all. It's about the size of Chokut Lake. It's about 18 miles long, that specific nook. It's not a very big area, but it's a very dense area. So to keep it that way, only 10 visitors per day are allowed at the bear viewing area from June 7th through August 25th. A total of 250 people get to go every year. That's it.
Rotated, yeah.
Yeah, so you get your permit system, you get 4 days at the McNeil River. You get flown in, you get dropped off, and in 4 days they fly back and pick you up. It's really rustic. You have to bring your tent. As you can see, my little, actually that's my husband's red tent I stole from him. I had actually 4 people in addition to me, so it was only 5 of us that ended up being there for that entire 5 days. And it was probably one of the best experiences I've ever done. If you get a chance to do it, it was the most pristine, wild area that like Alaskan fantasies are made out of. Beautiful snow-capped mountains, fireweed just blooming, every kind of animal walking in front of your tent. And as I said, it is really rustic. They do have outhouses. However, they also have a sauna. So that's really nice. You can get in there and clean off a full day of hiking. You can expect to hike probably 7 to 8 hours a day. Every day with a guide. That's part of your ticket packet that you get. And it was exhausting. I had my camera gear, which I brought my long lens and I didn't even need because the bears were right next to me the entire time. And it was hiking through mud and sod and grass and stuff and up and down because you are searching for those bears. And while they hang out in a pretty close area, you follow the set paths. You never venture from those paths. And when you're outside of the camping area, you have to stay with your guide. Actually, there has never been an injury ever. There has never been a negative interaction in terms of requiring any firearms or anything. No bear has ever been killed by visitors or anyone at the park. So as you mentioned before, those regulations are really, really strict. But it's definitely worth it. As you can see up here, here's a little platform that they have. You can hang out there and with your scope or your binoculars, just watch bears all day and they'll cruise within 25 feet of that platform. But you have to cook only in the cooking shack, which is to be expected. They have a really nice cooking shack. They have all fuel and cooking pots and utensils. You just have to bring all of your own food. And there is plenty of fresh water, but you do have to sanitize it. So it is a pretty backcountry kind of style camping, but you also get a sauna and a nice little cook shack set up for you. So it's actually quite comfy in terms of backcountry roughing it. So, it's quite famous for having a really solid density of brown bears. It's also just beautiful. The terrain is really rugged. There's also waterfalls. This is at McNeil. And in August, they switch over to this little waterfall over here that's kind of sets in 3 and kind of forage for that last run of dog salmon. So there's an early run, and then there's a late run of dog salmon.
What are the approximate dates of the 2 runs? The max? You have two surges?
Yeah, they had two surgeries. So I was there August, I want to say 17th through the 22nd. And that was the last end of that dog run. That's why there were so many still out there. And they were the younger ones that had not yet feasted on the first run, which was, I would say, early June. Pretty early June. I think he said the 15th was when they started seeing stuff out there. There's lots of volcanic features to explore across both sides of the park. Obviously, in the Aleutian side, you can see just volcanoes pretty much from your campsite, as I'm looking there with my little salmonberry. But also at Brooks Camp, you have one of the largest areas of that volcanic eruption, as I mentioned, and the Valley of 10,000 Smokes is another area that you can go backcountry camp and explore. But that area, I would say, is very for more expert camping and backcountry because there's really high incidences of brown bears there, and they're not accustomed, so you have to be kind of more careful. So we brought in our portable electric fence, which was felt nice because we definitely felt them and heard them crossing through. Let's see here. So these are little tips and tricks for both McNeil and Brooks Camp. If you're a photographer, which I'm not, but bring a battery backup to charge your camera batteries. There's no service, there's no cell service anywhere, so you don't need your phone, but you will need to take pictures if you want. And also for your inReach to make sure it's charged. For Brooks Camp, you can bring all your food, but there is a lodge. And it's actually quite good food cooking. You don't have to cook your food at all. But for McNeil, bring all of your own food. There's no need to bring cooking fuel or cooking gear either. Hip waders are probably one of the best things to have at McNeil River. You will be wading through multiple ponds and little river inlets. And it went over our hips multiple times. So that was... and it's wet, so it's always Alaska weather. What can you say? If that's how it is in the rugged coast. Down here, that's a volcano right in front of my tent right there.
Is that Mount Katmai?
It is not.
Pardon?
It's not. It's another one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's over here a little bit. I actually asked the pilot the same question when we flew over. But right around the bend here, yeah, it's just gorgeous scenery throughout the whole entire area. And you can still kind of cruise the sides of the island and find little Japanese floats, which are always nice if you're into beachcombing. Even far away on the northern coast, you still find handmade people items, especially because of the water washing everything up, of the currents. But besides that, you're not really expecting to see many people, but mostly bears. Between both of those trips, I think I counted 36 bears, 37 bears total. More bears in McNeil River, just because of the time that I went. But in Brooks Camp, we also got to see wolves and lynx. So, it kind of evened out a little bit. But yeah, any questions that you can see?
Your English fluency is probably better than mine, but I suspect that you learned yours in Europe.
You're pretty close. That the school I went to, I had an English teacher, so I might have picked up a little bit of accent, but I'm actually from Colombia. I was born in Colombia.
Oh, Colombia?
Yeah.
Colombia? Yes.
Yeah.
Next to Panama.
Yeah, I guess if you're not counting that little,
Yeah.
the little tiny connection.
Teddy Roosevelt stole Panama from Colombia. Pretty much.
And a few other things.
I have read in the history that there was a revolutionary group trying to get away from Colombia up in what is now northern Panama. And so
That
there was a
doesn't
big
have anything to do
altercation,
with
and
it.
there was and then it went to international arbitration, and it was decided that Panama would secure its independence.
Would
and
win.
Had the canal in line for that.
Oh, I'm sure
And
the rights to
I
the
read
canal were
also that-
involved there somehow.
On the commission, and the one that was the leader for awarding independence to the present day Panama away from Colombia was Kaiser Wilhelm, the German,
Yeah.
prior to World War One,
Oh,
and that was why the US ended up with it.
You can see if anybody online wants to unmute and ask a question.
oh yes.
You can see if anybody online wants to.
Oh, okay. Anyone online want to ask a question or have a comment? I can't see. Um, but yeah, I would say it was probably a trip that is best done with a few friends, first of all, just because of safety reasons. But also just because it's really wonderful place to get out into the backcountry and explore kind of like real Alaskan wilderness, and have those really close encounters if you're being safe, if you are, doing all the things that you're doing correctly. It's a really cool way to kind of see some of that magnificence of Alaska closer than you would have thought. But it is tricky to get to. Expect pretty bad weather, I would say. I did get really good weather in June. And June seems to be across the board from all of the guides that we heard from the best time to go, just because it's the driest, and you still get a good amount of bear action because you're either getting that early run, or you more get the cows with the sows with cubs in the June time. But I've always enjoyed that, so that was really fun. And we saw a few twins as well, so yeah, they're being productive out there. We saw plenty of salmon, plenty of bears across both areas of the Katmai coast. And if you have at least a week and a half to dedicate to going out there and checking it out, I would say go back or check it out again. But one thing actually to note that I just found out was, if you do want to go to Brooks Camp and camp out there, as I mentioned, they have that January 8th deadline. This year they started, it's only like $6 or $18 a night to camp. It's really cheap, but they just put in for this year a $75 per day impact tax. So it's still pretty cheap, but it's still now $90 per night. So it went from like $16 to an extra $75. And that's a bit steeper than was the original price. So that's new. Yeah. But keep that in mind. I mean, if you're flying out there, it's a high cost to fly, but if you can use your miles to get to King Salmon, it ends up being pretty reasonable, unless you're staying at the lodge, because yeah, they have a minimum of 3 days too. So there is an option of doing a day tour to Brooks Camp, but I do not suggest it at all, because even a few weeks after we were there, it was so busy that you can fly in into Brooks Camp. And they only let a number of people out into that platform. And people flew into Brooks Camp for the day and never got to the platform. So they just hung out in the little visitors area. And it's like a $1,200 flight for a day trip. So I would say if you can at all skip the day tour, ignore that and just try to spend a few days just doing some nice camping. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope some of you get to go to Katmai Coast. And if you have any questions, you can always let me know.